Chapter 26, The New Deal. Launching the New Deal. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was very optimistic, and he shared his ideas for his programs in the fireside chats on the radio, and he earned great popularity among the public and the news. He started off with the bank holiday, also known as the Emergency Banking Act, which closes banks and only allows the strong ones to reopen. $1 billion are back in the flow. However, there is panic about the banks that are dispelled. The Economy Act convinces the people that the government was in good hands, and there was a repeal of prohibition. The Agricultural Adjustment Act reduced crop production to stop the surpluses and the drops in farm prices. This helped the agricultural community prosper. The Resettlement Administration tried to move farmers to better land, but that was ineffective. What was more effective was rural electrification, which provided more electric power to farmers. The National Industrial Recovery Act gave concessions to labor, an increase in incomes. The incomes increase with the price increases. And so there's more public works spending. With the NRA, the National Recovery Act, Hugh S. Johnson had the Blanket Code, which established a minimum wage, maximum work week, and minimum prices at which goods could be sold. However, there were difficulties. Large firms dominated the small. Prices were artificially raised, and the employer recognition of unions did not happen like they wanted to. There was declining industrial production, and the Supreme Court rules the NRA codes unconstitutionally drafted, therefore they end. The Tennessee Valley Authority grows as opposition from utilities decreases. The hostility was after the exposés of corruption. The Tennessee Valley Authority, or the TVA, generated electricity from water, improved water transportation, eliminated flooding, and provided electricity to some for the first time. There was a resort to government-managed currency. The Glass-Steagall Act gave the government authority to curb bank speculation. The Federal Department Insurance Corporation insures bank deposits up to $2,500. The Securities and Exchange Commission allowed the government to police the stock market, and it represented the financial community was eroding. The Federal Emergency Recovery Act tried to give cash grants, but they were not enough. The Civil Works Administration put people to work on temporary projects, therefore pumping money into the economy. The Civilian Conservation Corps gave jobs for men in rural and wilderness settings. There was legislation to refinance farm mortgages, protect from foreclosure, etc. However, many still have problems. The New Deal in transition. Critics on the right and the corporate world are hostile to the New Deal. The American Liberty League arouses public opposition to their dictatorial policies. The critics on the left failed to gain much support. Dr. Francis Townsend started a movement for elderly pensions. This attracted support and led to Social Security. Father Charles E. Coughlin proposed a series of monetary reforms that he said would restore prosperity. Huey Long gained power in Louisiana by destroying the power of his opponents. He had a record of progressive accomplishments. He proposed the Share Our Wealth Plan, which essentially meant to take from the rich and give to the poor to end the Depression. In response to political pressures, the New Deal shifts in purpose and is called the Second New Deal. The Holding Company Act breaks up great utility holding companies and spoke harshly of monopolistic control. There was a trade union movement, a shift from craft to industrial unionism. Each industry is its own union. The Congress of Industrial Organizations. There was a conflict between the Congress of Industrial Organizations versus the American Federation of Labor. The Congress was more open to women and blacks, and it was more militant, and it represented new, whereas the American Federation of Labor was old. The United Auto Workers used sit-down strikes to gain recognition from General Motors. From then on, there was a decline in brutal strike breaking and a rapid growth of organized labor in unions. Social Security provided federal assistance to the elderly and unemployed. It was created as insurance, not welfare. The assistance was based on need. However, the Social Security program expands beyond its original intention. The Works Progress Administration was a system of work relief for the unemployed on a larger scale than before. It helped other artistic occupations as well as the youth in college. With all of these programs, men are generally helped through jobs, while women are generally through families, and gender roles are still established. FDR's opponents included the Union Party. However, Roosevelt wins a landslide victory in the next election. Democrats are still in the majority of the electorate, and the Republican Party would take decades to create a majority. The New Deal in disarray. Difficulties included continuing opposition, presidential political errors, and economic setbacks. FDR instituted court packing, which was an overhaul of the federal courts. He added justices because he wanted more liberals to balance out the conservatives. However, Congress ultimately defeated this measure. However, the court is no longer an obstacle after some of the justices retire. However, this episode did do damage to the FDR administration. National income is showing improvement. However, federal layoffs resurge, as well as unemployment. The Roosevelt recession of 1937 seemed to be a direct result of the administration's decision to reduce spending. And so there was a resumption of spending on antitrust reforms and public works and relief programs. The Fair Labor Standards Act established a minimum wage and a 40-hour work week, as well as limits on child labor. The 1938 New Deal comes to an end because Congress blocks its programs. And with the world crisis is an attitude for war. The limits and legacies of the New Deal. There was the establishment of the broker state, which meant that the federal government was the protector of interest groups. And supervisor of their competition rather than attempting to create universal harmony. Assistance goes to groups with the power to demand it, or politically important. Therefore, lesser groups don't get the help they need. There's limited assistance to African Americans. However, Eleanor Roosevelt pressures her husband to help them. The New Deal assistance does not entirely exclude blacks, so they still vote Democrat. And Roosevelt did have what was called a black cabinet, which was blacks in second-level positions in his administration. So the New Deal was not hostile to blacks, and it did do a lot to help advance them, but it was not a huge part of their agenda. John Collier tries to reverse the pressures on Native Americans to assimilate. And Indians are still the poorest segment of the population. John Collier tries to encourage traditional Indian ways, and they restored their right to own land collectively. However, they were still in territory that the whites did not want. There were symbolic gains for women. The first female cabinet member was Frances Perkins in the Department of Labor. There were women in lower levels of federal bureaucracy because of Eleanor Roosevelt's efforts. However, prevailing gender norms still continue. The New Deal generally supported the belief that women should stay out of work to open opportunities for men. In the South, New Deal relief programs did not challenge prevailing racial norms, and whites receive more than others. The West benefits from the public works programs and the farming economy. The South benefits from the Tennessee Valley Authority and rural electrification, as well as attention to its economic status. However, the New Deal fails to end the Depression. It creates the basis of the federal welfare state. Franklin Roosevelt enhances the power of the federal government, and therefore the American people now expect more from the government. From here, we move on to the global crisis, which will then lead to World War II.